Projections in NBA DFS are almost exactly like sneakers in actual basketball. "2020 was a year I think most of us would like to have a do-over on. But maybe the highlight of it, for me, beyond personal things, was the release of The Last Dance, the 10-part Michael Jordan documentary that came out on ESPN. Now, I was lucky enough, and am old enough, to have seen Michael Jordan play 3 times in my life. Twice with the Bulls, once with the Wizards. And this documentary was amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's currently on Netflix and well worth the watch. And I think for me, my favorite part was how it humanized him a little bit, this epic figure. I specifically think of the scene after his 4th title, where it's his first win since his father had been murdered, and he's on the ground, this huge man, literally, and in his size in our society, just laid low, literally lying on the floor, wailing. But the other thing that has always stuck with me is some of the coverage of draft night. And he gets drafted 3rd in the 1984 draft after center Akeem Olajuwon, who went first, and no great shame in taking Akeem Olajuwon, but of course, Portland going second, taking Sam Bowie as another big man. And it reminded me of many times in my life where I have been amazed at how people, smart people, can be so close to something and not really understand it, not really understand a big part of it. And I have that same feeling about DFS, and that's what we're going to get into a little bit here. But again, if you go back and watch, I think it's the first episode of The Last Dance, and see that draft coverage. They show internal Bulls people wishing he was taller. And I think my favorite comment was from Walt Frazier, who said, Michael's got to realize he's not 7 feet, so he can't carry a team in the NBA. And I just found that so interesting, in that the consensus in 1984 was you needed a big man to center your team around on both ends of the court. At that point, your best players ever are Wilt, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And so there's no way that little 6'6" Michael Jordan can carry a team. And again, the strategy of playing a ton of guys who can shoot threes and forcing their center off the floor, or to make difficult decisions, thus opening the basket, would have worked decades before it was tried, but just nobody quite saw it. We saw the same thing in baseball with Billy Beane around the turn of the century, finally giving us our first glimpse at anything that resembled actual understanding of equity and value on a baseball field. So to get around to DFS and how this incomprehension raises its head, it's mostly in the way we, the DFS community, view data. We love data. I mean, love. Just like, I want to feel it running down my neck. We are rapturously simple-minded in our love for all things data. We wants it. We
wants it. We needs it.
We love us some data. We see ourselves as the smart ones. We're, the scions of a new age of sports, and we're making fun of the announcers. And actually, coach, if you'd have gone for 2 there, you'd have had a 50.6% chance of winning the game, as opposed to, we loves us, the data. And I love me some data. My first basketball algorithm is a little more than 2 decades old. But the single-mindedness with which we approach it comes at a very real cost. Many very real costs. Time, efficiency, understanding. And this varies, unfortunately, sport to sport and data type to data type. But one of them that I want to focus on today, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, is I saw this year, for I think the 4th year at least in a row running, 2 talking heads, touts, experts on Twitter talking about how their NBA projections were superior. And this brings us to today's thesis. Projections in NBA DFS are almost exactly like sneakers in actual basketball. They are essential for playing at any high level, but everybody has them, and they won't win you shit. If you saw the introduction to this series, you'll remember how we talked about, and I won't go through the whole spiel again, but basketball is by far of the major sports and the major DFS arenas the easiest to predict because we just have a lot of data. So if you could more accurately predict baseball, that's pretty tough to do. You're looking at like 4 or 5 data points a game. There's a lot of variance there, and a guy can get a massive number of points on one play. If you think you understand who's going to score a touchdown better than other people do in football, that's got incredible value. Touchdowns are worth 6, 8, 10, 15 points, depending on reception and so on and so forth. But in basketball, we all already agree. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you've followed this industry at all, think of the 10 experts you think have the most credence in NBA DFS. Totally fine if I'm nowhere near that list. But their projections on any given day are almost goddamn identical. I have been on shows probably with 5 of the 10 people you just thought of. And almost all the time, you talk about a player and you're like, yeah, Drew Holiday, what do you have him projected for? 38.4. Oh, I have him for 38.7. It is more frequent that we agree exactly than disagree by more than, I'll say, 10%. It is remarkably, startlingly homogenous. And that's not odd. That's exactly what you would expect. We have a ton of data. It's very easy to project. Again, football, baseball, 5, 6, 7 chances to score, and you're going to score anywhere between 0 and 15 points for a home run or a 80-yard touchdown reception. Basketball, point here, 3 there, 2 there. You end up with this very easy distribution. So much data, so many games. All of these models that everyone has are basically rate of player, modified by matchup, times expected minutes, maybe with a couple cookies at the end of it, and we end up in the same goddamn place. And we've researched this and done some background checking on it, and you can use regression analysis afterwards to figure out that they're pretty good. So the guy who's sitting here telling you, you're going to win at NBA DFS because of my projections, because I have the best projections in the game, A, is probably completely goddamn wrong, but B, the thought, the claim is itself mathematically asinine. It's completely facile. You look at those top 10 experts we just talked about and look at a player on a given day, their projection for that player is usually going to read something like 25, 25.3, 25.5, 25.7, 25.7, 25.9, 25.9, 26, 26.1, 26.2. Let's assume somehow you're just the bee's knees and you figured it out and you know that the absolute, precise, correct projection for that guy is 25.3178. What the hell do you think that did for you, really? Seriously. There is enough variance left that that information is almost goddamn useless. It's not quite useless. And don't get me wrong. Again, this is like sneakers in basketball. You want sneakers. Get yourself some good projections. But there is lots of great basketball data to be had. But just here are my projections for a player on this day, and people who tout it as being the end-all, be-all of being good at fantasy basketball have a massive misunderstanding on the very basic level of what data is useful in this particular endeavor. It is quite like someone sitting at the YMCA or down at the park about to play basketball and talking to their friend and being like, I'm going to take you to the hole today. And you know why? Check out my new Air Jordans. No way you can stop me when I got these shoes. And the other guy's like, oh, that's what you think, but I got my retro all-star. Like, yeah, sneakers are important. On the rare day you get out there, and this happens in DFS where you're playing someone with the functional equivalent of loafers or slides, yeah, you're going to have a real advantage over that guy. But again, as opposed to 5, 6, 7 years ago, not a lot of people out on the court in the relative loafers these days. So that's just another little nugget. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll do another chapter, and we can start talking about better things to spend your time on. Because That's the real loss here. That is great. You might turn to me and say, Eddie, what are you talking about? Like, even if it's not worth a ton, don't I still want that little bit of an edge? Yeah, but it comes at a cost of not doing other things, simpler things, much, much better things. That could make your game a whole lot better. So starting tomorrow, we'll get into some of those ideas, and I look forward to continuing.